Welcome to our Chamber Live today. What we're looking at obviously is the environment and the economy and the balance. How do we get back to work and still balance all the good stuff that's been happening in the economy, in the environment, whilst making sure that actually we still have a sustainable, renewing and recovering economy within the Southwest. I think it's at the heart of a lot of us, really, that we really want to maintain this. So we've got some expert speakers today, which I'll introduce to you very shortly. In the meantime, in Stuart's absence, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to attempt a joke, good or bad. But I will just remind you that if you want to pose a question or make a comment or put up any of your own personal details if you think it's useful to anybody else, then please do so in the chat. You can do chat to everyone. If you want to message me something privately, then you can also do that. And I'll pick that up as we go along. If you want to pose a question for us to ask of our panelists after they've spoken, then again, you can either use the chat or afterwards I'll ask people to raise a hand. And you can either do that by waving at me and hope that I notice you, or you can use the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. First of all then, just a few updates from the British Chambers of Commerce and what we're doing as part of that. So as you're probably aware, some retail is going to be open this week. British Chambers of Commerce are advising obviously on the safe working practice of that, encouraging very much health and safety organisations, HSE, local authorities and so on to apply a policy of support rather than enforcement. What we're looking for is guidance, encouragement, not strict policing at the moment whilst people are still finding their way. It's really good to hear on Friday that the Chancellor has been listening to British Chambers of Commerce and others, other business organisations, and that I have managed to strike a careful balance with the furloughing flexibilities, made it a little bit easier, I think, for businesses to come back gradually rather than having to bring back those on furlough in one fell swoop. We can now start to think about bringing people back gradually and manage the cash flow accordingly. The extension of the support for the self-employed has been very well received by us and British Chambers of Commerce. Stuart and I have personally been pushing the policy team in Westminster from British Chambers of Commerce to make sure that self-employed do get that extra support, because it's very important down here with having so many sole traders, small businesses, that we feel that it's part of our duties to have pushed for that, and we're pleased that they have extended it despite being very reluctant to initially. We're also still pushing hard for those directors that have fallen between the gaps. At the moment, there's nothing coming at all on that. It seems to have fallen on deaf ears, but we are continuing to push because we know that those smaller businesses whose directors have not necessarily been taking a full salary but been taking it in dividends, you know, they employ quite a lot of people, and if they can't stay afloat, then it's going to be even more difficult for them to keep employing staff. So we're still pushing hard for that. Finally, the launch of the track and trace. As businesses, we really need to play our part. We need to make sure that we're supporting that wherever possible, but we have said as part of BCC as well that we need to understand how it's going to work, a bit more detail, especially when employees call in to say that they've been told to self-isolate because somebody in their household has been showing symptoms or been tested positive. You know, how does that work with an employer when that person can't come into work? So there's a bit more substance to come still on that one. There's lots more information, guidance, detail and comments from BCC on our website, on BCC's website, and obviously the gov.uk website. And also the local authorities all our local authorities are doing a really, really good job of supporting businesses and putting some really useful information and links out. So you'll find lots of information online there, but just make sure you go to the reliable sources. So I think that's it with regards to lobbying and policy and where we are. And let's get back to the business of today. So we've got Jackie Young from Urban Agenda, who quite a few of you may well have come across in the past. Jackie initiated the Plastic Free Plymouth, which I'm very proud to say that the Chamber were the first organisation to sign up to. And that's been gaining a lot of momentum. So Jackie's got a lot of interesting thoughts, a lot of questions to pose, I think, today for us. And then Marina and Paul, who set up last year, I believe it was, Green Forward, and business network for businesses looking to do business in a more greener and sustainable way. And we'll be hearing a lot more from them about how we can manage our own businesses likewise as we move forward and as we get back to working properly. I just wanted to say that I, amongst lots of other people I know, have been saying a lot lately, can you hear the birds? They're so much louder. And sometimes you go out even in the middle of a street somewhere and it's quiet, so quiet. And so the noise pollution has really, really diminished to such an extent. And I think what we're really looking at today is, do we want to see all that noise pollution, all that air pollution come back again? And I was interested to hear actually the other day somebody from the RSPB saying that actually the birds aren't singing any louder. If anything, they're quieter. It's just that they don't have to compete against all the background noise, which I thought was actually very telling. So I think that's what we have to think about, is not competing against so much background noise as we go forward. So without any further ado, I think I'll hand over to Jackie, who's going to lead us on her thoughts. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Jackie.
Hello, hi everybody. I know some names I'm recognising, and I know some of you will know me. My background at the moment, I'm a sustainability consultant and I manage Environment Plymouth, which is a strategic green thinking network in Plymouth. But my involvement with businesses, I've always had a penchant for working with businesses. Started with the Payback Environmental Business Association back in the early 1990s, and then working with Plymouth City Council, I then went on to work on the Climate Change Commission that we had, and also the Low Carbon Network, which was established to effectively guide people through the carbon reduction commitment, which was introduced and scared everyone rigid because of its financial implications. So being asked to do this is actually sort of a continuation of something that I've been interested in for quite a few years. There is a Chinese curse, which is not called coronavirus, which says, may you live in interesting times. And I think very much at the moment, you can understand quite how businesses are a little fearful of facing the future, what's going to happen, how restrictions are going to change the way that they have to work, whether they're going to have people working from home more, whether people can get into work, whether their supply chains and product chains, their marketing is going to happen in the same way. So there's a lot on people's plates at the moment, and a lot of the people that I work with have basically sort of said, well, actually, no one's going to be interested in the environment. But then equally, I've also been talking to a lot of business owners who are saying, well, actually, perhaps now is the time to think about it. The birdsong issue, I've spoken to a couple of people about that. Apparently the RSPB have also worked out that birds can change the frequency of their song, so they don't have to work so hard when it's quiet. So yes, we can hear it. We're seeing businesses that are seeing much more wildlife around at the moment, and they want to know how to deal with it on their premises. But I think the biggest issues have been in global and local climate emissions, CO2 emissions, and air quality changes. For example, in Plymouth, Tavistock Road, which is part of the air quality monitoring area, saw a 63% reduction in nitrogen dioxide emissions during the lockdown. That's absolutely massive for that area. Similarly, globally, at the moment, we're looking at a 26% reduction in CO2 emissions. And there have been a series of graphs of America and China looking at the difference before and after lockdown at pollution levels. Now, the challenge is not only to go forward taking that into account, but also how to make it work, because I've never been one for sort of, dealing with green and environmental issues at the cost of the business. But in a lot of cases, we know that doing energy audits, saving energy, green credentials actually sell products and they save money. So I think from here on in, it is a matter of saying, well, look, what's on offer? Are there funds available? Is there support available? And what do people want to do? We have the challenge of taking the Plastic Free Plymouth campaign forward. And I know for those of you who are in the rest of Devon that there's some very strong support around the county for plastic free campaigns. The Southwest Action Against Plastic, which is run by the Environment Agency, is a very good website, Facebook page for that. And it will tell you where your nearest group is. But there's possibilities for that, and there's a very big Interreg fund just about to be launched here in Plymouth, looking at the catchment area of the Tamar. We've got the potential to re-establish the Climate Change Commission as an advisory group going forward. I was at an event on Saturday, and there was very little representation for businesses, and yet businesses are a massive sector in sorting out what might happen going forward to a low carbon economy. So there are sorts of possibilities. There's also, how do we react to things like Build Back Better, new Green Deals, changes in indicators? For example, New Zealand has just moved GDP aside for health and well-being and happiness as an indicator of the wealth of the country. I suspect we may see that, if not from local government, from national government. And in some cases, it's a matter of waiting to see what's going to happen, to see what comes down from on top down to our level. But at the same time, I'm very aware that businesses can't afford to wait. They've got to get on with moving forward. They've got to get on with the shortfalls that they have, with catching up, with attracting new people in. So a lot of what I'd like to know, I've just seen the thing from Olivia about the background. I'll just get it turned down a little bit, please. Sorry, it's interfering with the audio. It's the problem of living in a small flat with not much room. But basically, what I'd like to know is what people think would work for them, what is working for them at the moment, what's not working, and what could be addressed, what they want to know more of, and how they would find that out. We've obviously got the Marina and Paul's network, but there's also possibilities for setting up smaller groups or local groups that can then feed into some of the other things that are going on. And there's also the sort of possibility of where would you go for information? What do you trust and what do you not trust? So I think a lot of what I'm interested in today is to listen to what you see as practical, what you want, and to see whether we can actually address that sooner rather than later. I hope that helps. Sorry, it wasn't 10 minutes, but...
That's fine, Jackie. It's such a huge topic. There's so much that it encapsulates that it's very difficult to drill it down just to a few minutes, isn't it? I know, I understand. But thanks,
definitely.
Jack. I think the thing is, it's just about putting some thoughts into our heads. how are we going to think differently when we do get back to work? How are we going to find out the information and share that information with others? It's not just necessarily about somebody having all the answers, because a lot of these answers aren't there. It's about us having to find them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's right. Environment Plymouth is setting up its own webpage at the moment, and a lot of that is being populated by what people want to see. So where do they go for that information? Some of it may only be links to other web pages. For example, the Carbon Trust does a lot for businesses on carbon accounting, and a lot of interesting bits and pieces that are on that site can be easily applied. It's very much the same with other campaign organisations. Surfers Against Sewage has produced an absolutely brilliant toolkit for businesses who want to tackle plastic. And we're tackling everything from plastic bags to hard hats in the construction industry. So I think you're right. People will sit there and go, I'd really like to do something about XYZ, but I don't even know who to speak to. So it's about who do they go to, where could it be found, and how easy is it? Because I really don't believe at this time, with everyone trying to cope with everything that's happening, people will have a lot of time to do a lot of research on going green. They're going to want instant, easy answers, simple things that are cost effective.
I agree with you. I think it's very much it's a starting point, and that's where we are today. I think it's for most of us, it's a starting point. And if any of you have already gone past that starting point, and I know Paul Edworthy is going to talk a bit about his greener business, then please share that with us, because we all need to know how can we make our lives greener in the future in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Jackie. That's great. I'm now going to pass over to Marina and then to Paul. We're going to just spend a few minutes each explaining their backgrounds and so on, and where they're coming from, and a little bit about Green Forward, because I do think it's something we should all be looking to take part in and to contribute to as we do generate our businesses in a more sustainable way in the future. So thanks, Marina.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, my name's Marina Hoole. I have a background of sustainability, really, and strongly believe in profit with a purpose. But at the moment, I'm COO at Employable, which is a career management platform, and co-founder alongside Paul of Green Forward Networking, as Helen just said. So Paul and I set up Green Forward Networking the end of last year, the end of the last quarter, and the last quarter of last year. And we didn't know how it would go, did we, Paul? We had absolutely no idea, but we're both really passionate about sustainability. We're like, we need to pull a group together, and we wanted it, this might sound really random, but we wanted it to be a non-judgmental space. So there's so many people at different points in the journey of sustainability, and there's also so many people not knowing where to start, what to do, different sized businesses, and we wanted them to all come together to share best practice. So Paul and I set up Green Forward Networking. The first event was in Plymouth, and it was a sellout, and they've been and our events have sold out since. And that shows you the demand for the knowledge around how to make your businesses more, how founders and CEOs and directors are wanting to make their businesses more sustainable. So we hold quarterly events. We encourage you to come along, and you'll speak to all sorts of people. We've had the CEO of the Eden Project. He spoke about their journey. So we like to bring in high quality speakers to talk about their journeys and the tools and processes that you can implement within your business. So that's Green Forward Networking if you want to join our mailing list, or you want to come along to one of our events. I'm also a senior advisor at Devon Garden Foods. We're a food technology company based around making plant-based, high-protein foods, which I think is going to become more prominent in the future as the government implement things such as reducing our consumption of meat and that type of thing in order to reach net zero. But my opinion, I think, on the reason we're all here today is how we can get a balance of sustainability and obviously growth back into our economy. I do think that COVID-19 has benefited the environment. I think it's absolutely amazing and I've loved it. But on the other hand, it has had that catastrophic effect or impact on people's livelihoods and careers. And I think that's at the forefront of people's minds at the minute. Because the foundations of sustainability happen when people's basic needs are met, such as job security, welfare. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everybody knows about that Maslow hierarchy of needs. So I personally believe that to achieve sustainability or sustainable growth post-COVID, and helping the economy at the same time, we need to think about how we're going to be repurposing and transitioning people who have lost their jobs because of the pandemic, and transitioning and repurposing those people into sustainable industries, for example, green energy, clean cars, clean hydrogen, that sort of thing. Now, I completely understand that this requires a complete structural transformation of the economy, and that includes changes in products, services, and also production processes. But I also think that a lot of the businesses that I know and that I'm talking to and who are part of Green Forward Networking, they've pivoted their business models, they've changed their services because of COVID-19. And I think that if they can do that because of this pandemic, you can also do it to become more sustainable and to help our environment. So I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts on that and whether they could implement more sustainable product processes. But I did also want to give the businesses on today's Zoom a tool which I think will help you if you're at the beginning of your sustainable journey. So it's a tangible tool to help offset your carbon, and the website is called almond.org. They're a startup, and it's a footprint calculator. So it gives you an analysis of your carbon footprint. It helps advise you on how to reduce your carbon footprint, and it gives you that progress bar as well. So it shows you how close you're going to be getting to net zero. And the lovely thing about it as well is that you can embed a nice visual dashboard onto your website, so your customers and your clients can also see that how far off you are reaching net zero. So I thought I'd add that in as well. I'm going to pass you over to Paul, who is co-founder of Green Forward Networking as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marina. Hi, everyone. So 2020, the year to shine for Green Forward Networking, trying to target business decision makers and highlight the facts about climate change. And then, boom, planes grounded, the price of crude oil crashing so low they have to pay you to take it off their hands, and the majority of the population communicating through a video conferencing app, a global pandemic. Now, there has been an increase in the use of renewable energy, fewer unnecessary journeys by vehicle in general, more focus on the circular economy, and cleaner air. Now, these are all things we wanted to encourage business leaders to focus their attention on. Marina and myself could see the vision, but without the death toll, and without it stemming from a global pandemic. I would like to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Paul Edworthy, co-founder of Green Forward and managing director of a green website hosting company called Dynamic Servers. Now, I launched Dynamic Servers back in 2017. We needed servers to host our websites and had the opportunity to acquire servers we could have powered 100% by renewable energy. There was a lot of attention on the damage we were all causing the environment, and at the time, I felt an ethical drive to do something or pretty much everything within my power to help in the fight against climate change. Having two small children, I hate to think that they would grow up thinking that we hadn't tried to reverse damage our generations have caused. Now, the average web server uses the same energy that it takes to boil 200 kettles in a day. And having built a carbon-reducing business that offers faster, more secure website hosting packages and with a lower price tag, I wanted to inspire other businesses to take a similar stance. I met Marina through LinkedIn. We immediately realised we shared similar values, and we agreed it would be great to start a business network focused on bringing sustainable companies together and inviting companies along to networking events who want to reduce their organisation's carbon footprint. Now, throughout the COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown, surprisingly enough, there has been some interesting statistics bouncing around, like only 9% of people wanted things to go back to normal, and 35% of shoppers saying that they would now choose ethical clothing companies as opposed to fast fashion, as well as some other similar trends. Now, the stage has been set for a shake-up not many of us thought we would ever have the chance for. And there's two things required to adopt a greener route. Now, these are the mindset and the strategy of individuals and businesses. And mindset, with the patterns emerging, is evident that people are realising the reality of the bigger crisis, the climate emergency. It's evident the timing is perfect to develop a greener business culture. Now, with the strategy, there's very few businesses that would be able to restructure overnight, and strategy should be seen as a more realistic timescale, be it 1, 5, or even 10 years. And we hope we can offer businesses guidance with principles we've adopted in our own businesses to help move people along for a greener future. Hand it back to Helen.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, as you can see, it is possible just by thinking about the way you operate to make sure that we are thinking of the environment, thinking of our futures and our children and grandchildren's futures without necessarily having to make massive changes initially. Had some really good chats, some privately and some to everyone. And I was just wondering, David Bayliss, if you would mind I know you've shared it on the chat, but maybe just explaining a little bit more about what you've been doing, and maybe some of us can learn from that, and maybe there are some questions you would like to ask of our panellists as well.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I sort of said in the chat room, our business has already started to think about what we can do when we sort of go back to working in offices. So we've got 9 offices across the country, 300 odd staff. So we've done a survey already of what working arrangements guys want to go back to. And I think it's overwhelmingly none of them want to go back to working full time, like 9 to 5:30 in an office-based environment. So they all want more flexibility in their work environment, and I think a lot of that has been down to the commute and how they can quickly get to work within sort of 15 minutes, half an hour of getting up, rather than having to commute to work. So I think that that's one of the items that they're looking at. It also gives them flexibility across their working day, so they're not fixed to particular working times. So I think us as individuals, I mean, one of the environmental things that does, in terms of car usage, is reduce it quite significantly. Just relying on people just to go and sit in an office, and I don't think there's a need to do that with what technology there is. So I think it could be more strategic in terms of face-to-face time. I mean, you still need those relationships, but I think when we look back about the number of meetings we used to drive to, both internally and externally, a lot of that, after the initial sort of set-up meetings and getting to know people, I don't think there's any need for it. And we've seen that, in the last 3 months, where companies are saying on projects going forward that they're basing their time and their fees on just doing video conferencing and only attending site once every sort of 3 or 4 months rather than every month. So I think it's just trying to a basic level in terms of that commuting time, that everyone can sort of look at that as a sort of an option to help. So I think that was just sort of one area that us as a business had looked at, and we've also looked at how we're going to adapt our workspace accordingly, so we have less fixed desking and more agile workspace and more collaborative space, so that people come together for team meetings rather than just being sat at a fixed desk, which has been the norm for our business, for the last sort of 30 years that I've been involved in it.
Mm. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that, David. I think there's a lot there that I think a lot of us on this call will be able to connect with. I know at the Chamber, when we're not 350, we're just 10, but even so, I cannot see us going back to working the same way we did, certainly all of us being in the office at the same time. And for me personally, I feel so much more productive at home. I do miss the interaction with the team, although most of them are furloughed at the moment, so perhaps that's why I miss it even more. And going back to last week when Tim York-Dunn was talking, I think the key thing about the remote working is as managing as a team and keeping that motivation and so on. So it's a bigger issue than just the environmental one, I think. But I know that certainly we will be doing a lot more home working. We'll certainly be doing a lot more meetings this way. It's so much more time effective, cost effective, and obviously it's much more effective for the environment that way. So yeah, in all those elements, we're a much smaller business, but again, that's going to drive down the emissions from our car, and also it'll save us money as individuals. It's going to save us money on the fuel and so on. So I think it's a win-win all round.
Yeah, I'm going to say, just mention about teams and sort of staying in contact, is our sort of HR sort of training teams have started to roll out workshops about how you effectively do that. So I think that, adding that sort of training program as part of your work, work patterns and work environment, even if it's internal or external, I think would be a key thing to do. Once you start to think about changing your work pattern, is to help individuals sort of come together in terms of managing and in interacting in different ways. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right, David. Yeah, I agree with that. So I've had a couple of other questions here. One about Plastic Plymouth for you, Jackie. So that launched last year with the Chamber, and we were very proud to do that. There's a question about how it's progressing. Was it 2030 or 2050 you've got targets for? And are you likely to be rolling that kind of thing out further afield in Devon?
Right. It's been incredible in Plymouth. We decided we would go for Surfers Against Sewage's Plastic-Free Communities initiative. And to do that, we had to secure the commitment from businesses, community groups and schools, which we managed for the waterfront in 2018 and then for the city in 2019. So we have a system of targets that we set, and businesses can become plastic-free pioneers. They lead the way. It is being rolled out across the rest of the UK. Poor Surfers Against Sewage, I think they thought about 40 towns and villages would take it up, and I know they're coming up to about 700 taking part. And we've got 2 of the 72 associations that have and accreditations that have been applied. But the beautiful thing about the plastics campaign is that anyone can actually do it. Anyone can go into their kitchen, their bathroom, the bedroom, look around and find a single-use plastic item or an avoidable plastic item that they could swap for something else that's more eco-friendly or ditch completely. I think the thing about the plastics campaign is that it is getting bigger. It's one of these things that even though we've had lockdown for so many months, people are still looking into. They're still looking at what they can do, and because it's so easy to do, people are, while they've been on lockdown, they've been sorting out their plastics and recycling. There's going to be a lot more recycling. There's going to be a lot more innovation and creativity. So in other words, what are the alternatives? There's going to be a lot more awareness raising of why, take your rubbish home with you. This weekend there's been an appalling amount of litter left around the city and the beaches and the countryside in Devon and in the city, and we're trying to do some work on that. But it benefits from it's literally is a more the merrier. So the more people we encourage to take part, to become pioneers or ambassadors or school champions, the better. So we have got some targets that have been set by Interreg. The Interreg targets go for the next 3 years, but I think the city's plan for plastics is to 2030. So it'll be a rolling programme of hopefully general improvement. And anyone, I'll put an email address up in a minute, but anyone who wants to know more about doing that, you would be very, very welcome. We're probably going to kick-start again in the autumn once things have eased up a little bit. But the website that Environment Plymouth is putting up has got a page dedicated to plastic-free Plymouth. So hopefully the information you'll need will be there sooner rather than later.
Great. Yeah, I'm with you there completely, Jackie. So it's the simplicity, you know, when you're looking at where do you start, it really is the simple things that you need to start with. Well, we did one of the things in our office that when we were holding our meetings, our events, we were bringing in sandwiches from Marks and Spencer's, for example, and they had the plastic trays. Well, we decided to cut that. And not only have we cut that out, we've also started buying in from local caterers who bring in their trays and so on and then take them away again and reuse them. So we're buying local as well as, and obviously cutting down emissions, then as well as reducing our plastic. So there are lots of little things you can think about doing initially. And you're talking about the littering, Jackie, that brings me on nicely to Clean Devon. We've got Annette Denith, is that right? Annette on the call. Annette's from Devon County Council, and she's coordinating the Clean Devon partnership, of which I'm representing the Chamber as part of. So Annette, would you just give a couple of minutes explanation of what Clean Devon's trying to achieve?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. You can hear me? Yes, just checking before I keep talking. So yes, this new partnership, Clean Devon, was launched right at the beginning of March, just when COVID-19 launched itself. So I don't think anyone particularly noticed. But what it is, it's a group of interested parties, including yourselves as the newest partners, such as the police, the Environment Agency, all the councils, the Devon Wildlife Trust, the NFU, the CLA, and the Federation of Small Businesses, and those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head, who are going to work to coordinate and collaborate to try to reduce the litter and fly tipping across the county, and including Plymouth and Torbay. Because obviously there's a great impact on the environment and on wildlife, but also on the economy, on tourism and on businesses such as yourselves. So it's in everybody's interest that we work together to reduce this scourge. So at the moment, we're working behind the scenes to make sure that protocols and plans align with each other, and that, you know, one district isn't doing something different from the next, for example, and that we also share intelligence with the police and with the Environment Agency to try and catch criminals, because obviously it is a criminal offence. So we've had our first campaign, which was to check who you pay to take your rubbish away, because if they're not licensed and it gets tipped and there's evidence, you can be prosecuted who gave them the waste in the first place. And I don't think everybody knows that. But in terms of businesses, there's a number of things that potentially you could do. Just to remind you, in your last profile, Spring magazine, there was an article on Clean Devon where the website details are, so it's just cleandevon.org, where you'll see a section on advice for businesses, which is to make sure you dispose of your waste legally, but also perhaps join buy with confidence scheme, which gives buyers the confidence that you are a good business environmentally and deal with your waste properly. But also there will be sponsorship opportunities, but I probably think this is not a good time to mention that. But potentially you could perhaps organise litter picks. Again, not quite, timing's quite not quite right yet. But the National Great British Spring Clean has been postponed to September, so maybe that will be an opportunity to get involved. But yeah, please visit our website and see how you might get involved.
Yeah, thanks Annette, appreciate that. And we will as a chamber be keeping all that information coming out to you through our newsletters and profiles and emails and so on, with Devon County Council being one of our patrons now. And obviously I'm very passionate about it, so being on that partnership means that we will encourage businesses to get involved on a bigger scale as we move forward. So thanks Annette for that. Just had a few extra questions here. I don't know who would like to tackle this one. It's about the subject of temporary road closures to provide more space for cycling and walking. I think this person who's raised the question says, I think it will help enormously around the Barbican and the Hoe, but it will also help the midst of giving more space back to public realm rather than car-dominated infrastructure. I was hoping to have had one of the planning execs from Teignbridge District Council on the call today, but unfortunately she's had to attend a different meeting. And this is something that I know they've been talking about in Teignbridge, is even just some of the lanes, so that, and it ties in a little bit with another question I think Tony Cobley asked about school journeys and so on, and can we get children and parents walking and cycling to school again? You know, it's about, if there are less roads open to traffic, will more people be willing to cycle, walk and so on with their children to school, to go shopping, to get around, whether that's the lanes or in the middle of a city? I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that, panellist or non-panellist.
I can probably add a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyone who's read the Herald over the last few days will see that there's been a lot of letters in about limiting access to the roads around the Hoe. It's not just a matter of blue badge holders and access. I think a lot of people feel that access to the Hoe is almost their right as a resident of Plymouth. So it's not quite as cut and dried as it appears. But the idea of actually limiting road access and extending the pedestrian space and the cycling space has been applied in cities right the way across the UK because of the social distancing limits. And I think a lot of cities are finding that, in fact, it works very, very well. I know one of the options that York took was to ban delivery lorries between, I think it was 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. because the old town of York just couldn't cope with having lorries and cars and cycles and tourists. So there are lots of possibilities, but we're not quite sure yet what the funding options that Grant Shapps announced are going to be and where they're going to be used. But it's worth keeping an eye on it because it's going to happen. And as for school runs, one of the biggest problems with school runs is people's cars idling as they're dropping people off or picking them up. So one of the biggest things that we can do with the school runs, even if they do go back to exactly what they were before, is to try and persuade people to just stop the idling and turn the engine off while they're waiting. Because that one, in Plymouth, certainly, it's one of the biggest issues.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. It's going to make a massive difference as well to the fitness and well-being of us all, but particularly our children as we move forward. Tony, did you want to add anything to that? Because I know that you're in Ivybridge, And you're quite close to the school run, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, like where you are, Helen, in Ugborough, you wouldn't expect kids to walk down the lanes all the way to Ivy Bridge, but you know, we've got lots of safe, well lit streets all around the school, and you just see hundreds of children being dropped off in cars. And we never used to do that when we were kids. You know, we used to walk or cycle. So it seems like, you know, we think we're going forward with becoming more eco, but there's a lot of stuff like that where we're going backwards.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is where business people, you know, people that use the roads, use the facilities so often, not just for our businesses but for our families. This is where we need to raise that voice, and something like Green Forward and Urban Agenda is where we need to use these opportunities to keep this subject, this topic, moving forward. And if we can do that by combining with Clean Devon and so on, then I think then we're definitely on the right track. I'm just trying to scroll through here to see if there are any other questions. I think the key thing is really about where to start. Has anybody got anything else they'd like to share with us? You know, what you're doing at the moment, how you're planning to get back to a greener, sustainable road to recovery in your business? No, obviously not. Well, those of you who joined us on Friday for when Sir Gary Streeter was with us, you might remember that he said, and this isn't breaking any real confidences, that when the subject of the environment was raised, he assured us that Boris is very, very green. He has a lot of green credentials. Now, we might not see that, but apparently behind the scenes, his fiancée and so on is greener than green. And so she presses him very hard on this. And he has actually said, and the government have actually said that, and I quote it here, they don't envisage going back to work as usual in any way, shape or form. And in fact, they're wanting to use the crisis for good. So the things that Grant Shapps was talking about in recent weeks with regards to using more public or less public transport, using less cars and so on, and getting on your bikes and walking wherever possible, is really just the start of it. And I think we should expect to see an awful lot more come out in the future if what Sir Gary Streeter has to say is right. And I think the key for this is that, you know, it's been a really tough time, and we've all acknowledged that we would like all of these things to have happened, but without everybody dying from COVID-19. But actually, we shouldn't let these people die in vain. We should actually make sure that there's a good reason for them having died, and that we maintain a much better, clearer, cleaner environment for future generations, because it's in our remit. You know, in our generation's remit, that I think we should do this now. So any other questions? Let me just have a quick look at the chat. So David again has said about driving the school run. If we provide more flexible working and more working at home, hopefully more people will be able to work in. And it is just that thinking outside the box, I think, very much. It's just thinking a little bit differently. If we're flexible, if we're not all on the road at the same time, it's going to be much easier for us to manage time around our children, around our commute and so on. And even with commuting to work, even if we are going in, if we can perhaps go in a little bit later and leave a little bit earlier or whatever, so that we share the load, that's all going to be a bit easier for us as well. There's some great chat here. So if everybody can see the chat, I think, oh, David Bayliss, did you want to say anything, David Bayliss, or have we covered everything that you wanted to?
The only thing I was going to add, Helen, I mean, I sort of mentioned it in the chat, is I'm a bit disappointed that Plymouth City Council seem to be completely silent on all of this. I mean, if you go across social media channels and you see, I mean, Exeter as being like probably our closest city, I mean, they seem to be very vocal about trying to make change in their city. The Exeter City Futures group, the council, the leader of the council actually provided videos, the Exeter cycling campaign, local councillors there, they all seem to be very proactive in promoting, you know, time for change within their city. And I must say, I'm very disappointed. I think Plymouth have been completely silent on the matter. And when I've tried to sort of reach out to Tudor, to Johnny Mercer, I mean, Johnny's just been totally rubbish and completely silent. Luke Pollard, you know, has had some sort of pointers to make, but I mean, Tudor, you know, I just find him particularly negative on the whole subject as well. I'm just wondering, as you know, in terms of a group of people who are, you know, sort of passionate about sustainability, environment, how do we collectively lobby the council to actually do something meaningful and take this opportunity? Because I think unless we start doing that, I think that I can't see how we're going to be able to influence it if they're not willing to come out and be, you know, get into the public environment to talk about it. I mean, I know they're they're quite a risk-adverse council anyway, and anything that you try and implement, you know, takes a long time to get put forward from my own experience. I'm just wondering if other people feel the same.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what other people have to say. In the meantime, I will just say that obviously Luke Pollard is the Shadow Environment Secretary, and I'm trying to get him onto one of our Chamber Live events. So it'll be really good to get him involved, to see, obviously not in government, but he's going to be very influential nationally as well as locally.
Yeah, being Labour, I mean, with Tudor being Labour, I mean, they sing from the same hymn sheet. So, you know, it'd be good to try and, you know, get a bit of political lobbying going on, because I think at the moment it all seems very muted.
Yeah. And Tudor Evans was on one of our Chamber Live events a few weeks ago, and he has asked to come back. So I will arrange that and get him back, and then we'll make sure that we include some questions on the environment and what's going on around the Hoe and the Barbican and so on. So we'll see what we can do that way, and we can directly lobby David. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, just talking about retail and leisure, I mean, in terms of like handing more external space over to cafes and restaurants so that they can use the external space more. You know, think about Mutley Plain, for instance. You know, I think it's another prime area where it's a two-lane carriageway there. I mean, why don't we try and offer more space for, you know, the units there to be able to use more external space and create more public realm, so that they can open up, and even if it's a queuing system, you know, it's in a nicer environment so that people aren't trying to go into the road to get around them. And again, I just think there's opportunity in like Plimpton, Plymstock, places like that where people would be congregating amongst retail, that we can offer opportunities for them to start opening up their places and get their economy going.
Absolutely, and I think that's the whole value of these kind of forums and Green Forward and so on, is that we need to have a voice, and I think certainly Green Forward, with the support of people like Urban Agenda and Clean Devon and so on, you know, I think that's what we need to have. And if I can make that forum happen here on Chamber Live, or once we're back to meeting face to face, you know, I do think perhaps we ought to have a whole conference seminar on it. And look at how we're managing it within Devon. I'm sure Annette and the team would help out with that at Devon County Council. Yeah, great. Thank you. George Middlemiss, you just wanted to have make a point?
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Thank you, George.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit about what we're doing at Plymouth Community Homes at the moment, and it's not so much. I should probably start by saying I'm the Environmental Performance Officer, and I'm relatively new to the business. But so it's not really in response to the crisis, but we're looking at doing an ESG report, and that's Environment, Social and Governance report, which is highlighting our environmental, social and governance credentials, and the reason we're doing this is because investors are starting to demand transparency on these issues, and I mean that's just a really, really exciting prospect. And I suppose it's not particularly relevant to smaller organisations, but I'd really recommend, and I don't know the sort of scale of the organisations that are part of the chamber, but any larger organisations that do take private investment, really I'd encourage you to start looking at ESG investing and how you can be more transparent around those issues. And then I suppose for smaller businesses, one thing I'd add, and I'm curious to get Jackie's input on this as a consultant, is what opportunities there are for smaller businesses to get assistance with sustainability, because this is my job, my full-time job for Plymouth Community Homes, is looking at these issues, but lots of smaller businesses just don't have that sort of time to devote to it. And when I've spoken with consultants in the past, they have mentioned that there are occasionally opportunities for smaller businesses to get funding or essentially free consultancy that will really help them to engage with these issues in a holistic way, rather than just a sort of piecemeal issue by issue. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, George. It's a good point, isn't it, that some of the smaller businesses, we just don't have the resources to commit to that, and so we need to use those who have got the experience and so on. So thanks for that. Can I just ask if everybody's happy for us to share contact details with everybody else on the call? If there's anybody not happy, perhaps you just raise your hand. No, that's great. So I will share that out afterwards. A couple of people were asking whether we could share out the information. That's great. Brilliant. Well, we've come to the end of our time. It's just about 3 o'clock now. That's gone really quickly. Thank you so much to our panelists, to Marina and Paul and Jackie. I think it sparked a lot of conversation, and it's a conversation that we need to continue very much so, and gain a bit more momentum on it. If you could make sure that we've got all your information, Marina and Jackie and Paul, then I'll make sure that we get that out to everybody as well. Any relevant links, websites that might be of use, then that would be great. And all it leads me to say is that next Thursday morning we have a networking brunch. So those of you that are going to be using a lot more online conferencing, because you're not going to be going into the office as often and out to meetings, Tom Moore from Acronyms will be giving us a tutorial in using Microsoft Teams, how we can use that more effectively. And it'll be a bit of a tutorial and then lots of questions and answers and a little bit of networking thrown in with that. So bring your coffee and a bacon roll along, and we'll have a bit of a brunch together. Next week's Monday Chamber Live will be Jason Berry, who'll be taking us through the business toolkit. How do you make your company safe to go back to work? So there's an online toolkit which is available. We've sent out links to it, but Jason will be talking us through it, how to complete it and how to get the best from it, so that we can all return to work and get our employees returning to work when they're not working from home, of course, safely, and manage that effectively. So I think that just about ties it all up for today. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you've got any questions, please do email myself or Olivia. I think you've got our email addresses. We've all emailed you out in the last few weeks. So please do get in touch, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one, and hopefully next Thursday with our networking. Take care, everybody, and keep safe.